I'm with Jonathan Feldstein from Genesis 123 Foundation, and we're talking about the ongoing war. You're an Orthodox Jew, so did you see the news on Saturday morning, or was the news off for you on that day?
Oh, that's a good question. No, the news was off. Our phones were off. The computers were off. We were roused out of bed at I overslept and about 9 o'clock with an air raid siren blaring about 50 meters behind my head in the out my bedroom window. It sent us out of bed scurrying to our bomb shelter, along with two of our kids because it was Saturday, the Sabbath. We also didn't have lights on down there. We didn't think, no one went to bed Friday night thinking that Saturday morning we'd be waking up, needing to be in a pitch black bomb shelter
Mm.
for a number of minutes, 4 or 5 times during the course of the day. Even though it was light out, we could barely see anything inside. And we really didn't have any sense of what was going on until 4 p.m. when our oldest son came home, one who just got married this summer, and said he came to pick up his uniform and his military gear because he had just been called back up into his combat unit and obviously had been known what's going on and told us at least about the beginning of what happened on Saturday morning.
So you were hearing the sirens and you knew something was up, but you didn't actually know what it was.
Correct. We knew it was something bad, and it was. I wish you could have been here, just observing the conversation. Only two of my kids were home, and we more or less had our Shabbat day mostly normal, minus the air raid sirens and running to the bomb shelter. But we spent an awful lot of time speculating about what it could be because
Mm.
you know this, where we live, it's 40 miles from the northeasternmost corner of Gaza and 45 to 50 miles from where they'll be firing rockets. And we've had them here before,
Yeah,
but it's very rare.
yeah.
And we understood that if rockets were coming here, something else was going on. The rampant speculation was wild, but we never, ever could have imagined
Mm.
that it was a complete overrunning of the border with thousands of terrorists coming in and wantonly running around taking control of Israeli communities and murdering people in cold blood. That was never a scenario that
Yeah.
anyone could have imagined.
Yeah. So putting in context, as an Orthodox Jew, you don't listen to the news, you don't have the television on, you don't have the telephone on, so you're completely oblivious to anything that's going on a Shabbat.
Yeah, the rules when Shabbat is a day of rest, and that means no work. And the various categories of work as interpreted in modern days include not being online, not using the phone, TV, computer. I'm sure you've been in buildings, and listeners who have been in buildings in Israel on Shabbat remember that there's what's called a Shabbat elevator, where the elevator runs on its own. And you've been here in my house, so you know
Mm.
that we have a 7-story building and the elevator on Shabbat runs on its own, so we don't have to push buttons. We're completely offline. In fact, I was telling my kids how the only other harrowing experience that I had, I remember we were still living in America when Prime Minister Rabin was assassinated, but I was offline then. And I happened to be walking to synagogue in the afternoon, and some man who wasn't Jewish said to me, "Hey, just thought you'd want to know that Prime Minister Rabin had just been assassinated," which took place sometime mid-afternoon on the east coast of the US. But we unless it's something that's life-threatening and we perceived that it wasn't life-threatening to us, we don't need to be online.
Yeah. So was it deliberately that they attacked on a Saturday on Shabbat?
I have to believe that it was, and I have to believe that it also wasn't a coincidence that they did it the day after the anniversary of the Yom Kippur War attack on October 6th, 1973, which is also a surprise attack. And it wasn't just Shabbat, it was also one of our festivals. So as a result of that, whether they knew it or not, what they did is they caught us with many more soldiers on leave
Mm.
because of the Shabbat and the holiday at the same time. And there were certainly other military and intelligence failures that we're going to learn about over the coming months. But right now, the point is to regroup, prevent Hamas from ever thinking that they would do this again, prevent them from having the means to do this ever again, and restoring deterrence so that Hezbollah and Iran and anyone else will never think of it because, and I don't say it with glee at all, but what has to happen right now is a military consequence that will be so punishing that for another generation or two, no one will ever consider such a thing.
Has this been a shock to Israel, and has it been a humiliation to Israel as well?
I think the answer is yes to both. Definitely a shock. I would love to know if there was anyone anywhere who proposed this scenario that you could have thousands of Palestinian Arabs from Gaza overrunning a border fence and coming in freely and taking over entire communities, randomly going door to door for hours and hours and hours. I mean, there may still be terrorists in
Yeah.
Israel for all we know. They had the opportunity. No one was taking attendance when they came in, so we don't know how many. We only know how many bodies were left behind, but we don't know how many came in. We don't know how many went back. And yeah, an embarrassment, a shock. And it's not just a shock, especially in the border communities. You've been following the news. It's a shock for all of us. And we're all, and you know this, I think, Paul, we're already at the stage where very few Israelis, if anybody, doesn't know somebody, at least who knows somebody
Mm.
who's been killed or kidnapped or wounded. Yesterday, we had a friend in the house whose two different cousins from different sides of her family were both killed.
Wow. Wow. Yeah, it's a shock. It's a shock. Do you have children in the army or being called up at the moment?
We do. My son, as I mentioned on Saturday, he came home in the afternoon and got in his uniform and took his equipment and he is in a combat unit. We've heard bits and pieces from him. He's my son who just got married this summer, and I always find it always. This week, I found it ironic that in Deuteronomy, I think it's Deuteronomy 24, there's a prohibition of taking a new groom away from his wife in the first year of their marriage for war, but it is a war, and that's the contradiction. So
Mm.
he's there, and my son-in-law as well. He's in a position where one of the things that we knew for sure, even though we didn't know what was going on, is that my son-in-law would have been called up among the first, and he was, but he had trouble getting there. So what's ironic is he ended up taking one of our cars and driving to his base where our little blue car is still sitting for we don't know how long.
Yeah. As a father, how do you feel about this?
As a father, it's harrowing. My son-in-law and my daughter-in-law are like my children. My daughter-in-law was just here visiting yesterday briefly. I can't imagine what it's like for her now because next week they were supposed to move into their apartment where they were both starting university. And I don't even know if the university school year will begin on schedule next week. But how horrible! They're newlyweds, and she's now living back at her parents' house because she's got nowhere else to be and doesn't going to live alone in her apartment. And my daughter is home alone with with three kids under 5, and that's hard. And everybody in her building, except for two, have had their husbands called up into reserves. I have two adult daughters who have apartments in Jerusalem, and they've both moved back because their apartments are in older buildings where they don't have a bomb shelter. And they felt, wow, well, if we're home alone and not going to work anyway, we may as well be home where there's a bomb shelter and where the food is free. So here they are, and that's lovely. And my youngest daughter has her very close boyfriend was also called back up into the army. So it's harrowing. And as a parent, and I'm parenting someone at different ages. The other day, my second daughter told me that one of her best friends lost a cousin, and they were all hysterical. And how do I parent my daughter who's home alone with 3 children? And how does she parent her 3 children?
Mm.
Who only the oldest of whom understands that their father went to be in the army, but they don't know what's going on. It's a heartbreaking thing.
Is this the time where faith really kicks in and you just really have to trust God for the safety of your family?
Well, we always have to trust God, but this is the time that we have to trust God on steroids and faith. And for me personally, I've been obsessed with the news. I feel we were living in the US on September 11th, 22 years ago, and I saw the buildings burning from across the river and was glued to the TV and to the news and filled with fear and worry. And I'm having exactly that same trauma now personally, but my response has also been to dig deep into my work. And we're good friends, so I don't feel like I'm having an interview, just a conversation. But I've had many, many interviews with people in, I don't know, 3 or 4 different continents already this week, and briefings that I'm doing. Another briefing tomorrow, Thursday, called Fighting an Ethical War with an Unethical Enemy, where we're getting dozens so far of responses for that. And now we're raising money for emergency needs with soldiers and with at-risk youth, and to supply civilian security needs in communities like mine and along the Gaza border, so that we can engage people. There are millions and millions of people out there who want to help, who know Israel is in the right, and I have to do everything in my power, all waking hours of the day and even hours that I shouldn't be awake, to do my part.
Now you run Genesis 123 Foundation, and you're doing an appeal at the moment. You basically connect with Christians all around the world. So you're an Orthodox Jew connecting with Christians all around the world, and you're doing a special appeal at the moment. Tell us a bit about that. What are you doing?
Yeah, and it literally is all around the world. It's been such a blessing and comfort to me. This week, I've had conversations and prayer events with people in Nepal, Brazil, Sweden, Nigeria later today, South Africa, multiple ones in the US, you in the UK. So that's wonderful. But yeah, I knew initially we needed to jump in. And again, you know me, my integrity is such a level that I'm not going to tell people we're raising money for X unless I know for sure there's a need and a way to deliver. So in the first 24, 36 hours, I didn't know exactly what the needs would be, but I knew intuitively that there were going to be needs for things for our soldiers. So, for instance, my son, even before he left the house in the 10 minutes he came to change, he realized he didn't have proper socks to
Mm,
wear. And he only packed for in one bag and a backpack. So they need more clothing and underwear and hygienic supplies. Food has been in short supply in some areas. And what I was able to confirm with him yesterday is that his reserve unit is short of a number of bulletproof ceramic vests. So we're now working feverishly to get those. They cost $760 a piece. And oh, and even I'm looking at one on my desk here, even phone chargers. They have to be able to keep their phones charged, if only to be able to call their mothers and fathers and siblings and spouses and kids and tell them that they're okay. So that's something that's really practical. And I work with a facility for at-risk youth in Sderot. I've been very worried, Paul, this week because no one's responded to me. But I
mm,
know the needs are great because these are precious children who live in a community that's unsafe, and they come from homes that are unsafe. So we've been blessed to raise a good bit of money already, and it's still coming in, be providing trauma counseling and other forms of therapies for them. And then in communities like ours, one of the things that we've done that's very successful is provide a fully equipped backpack, costs about $1,500 a piece, that has anything you could possibly want for any kind of medical or security or other kinds of emergency. They're not weapons. We're not arming anybody, but we need to provide so that if, God forbid, there should be a terror attack on an individual basis or like this, that these people who have these bags can have portable stretchers that fold up into the size of your hand,
mm.
and many other things. So that's our main focus right now. And I've been blessed and grateful and comforted that so many people have responded from all over the world. And because what I do is build bridges with Christians, it's also my real special privilege to make sure I tell my fellow Israeli Jews that this money is coming from Christians from
Mm,
all around the world who love us.
mm. So this is what you're raising money for, is to save lives, really, isn't it?
It's all about saving lives either physically or emotionally, because the children who are being traumatized right now, yes, they have threats to their life physically, but these are scarring things. If you imagine a 10, 12, 15-year-old kid in the Gaza area, they've only grown up knowing rockets. And this war, and a war that's impeached their community, where they have neighbors and friends who have been murdered, maybe relatives, it's trauma that they're going to take with them for the rest of their lives. So we need to strengthen them, and we need to provide whatever resources that we can. And I did a briefing on Sunday, which was super well attended, and I said to everybody when I was listing these and other things that we were intending to do, I said, if I had $1 million for each of them, it still wouldn't be enough.
Yeah.
And that's what listeners should take away. That yes, we've got over 1,200 dead so far and almost 3,000 injured, and the casualties will continue as long as this goes on. But the trauma
Yeah.
that is going to linger and linger for months and years.
How is your son's unit? Are they okay? Are they going to have to go into Gaza, do you think? Can you even say that?
Well, if I knew, I wouldn't say, and the truth of the matter is I don't know. But they are a combat unit, and that's what they're trained for. He was very, what's the word? When we spoke to him last night, he was in very good spirits.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was in good spirits, but we don't know. We
Yeah.
don't know what he's going to do. One of the things that was a big comfort yesterday, I actually need to remember to write about it in my most recent article, is he told us where they're stationed right now. It's in a peripheral community, and neighbors, just like we did here in 2014 when hundreds of soldiers were stationed in our community for that operation that was going on then, total strangers opened their homes for the soldiers to come in and take showers. They took the soldiers' dirty laundry and washed it and returned it folded. Israelis are stepping up. And even though we've been brutally beaten right now, the unity, the volunteerism, the sense of togetherness is quite extraordinary. I'm sure you know this,
Yeah.
but 300,000 soldiers were called up and 350 to 360,000 soldiers have shown up.
Wow. Does Israel need to take the Gaza Strip? And if they do, will this actually bring peace to the Palestinians as well as to the communities round in the Sderot area?
That is one of the best questions because the myth that Israel somehow occupies Gaza is obscene because Gaza has been occupied and overrun and held hostage to all of Hamas and Islamic Jihad now for nearly 2 decades. And I am grieving for the average Palestinian Arabs there who have suffered under Hamas and as the consequences of Hamas. And I pray that they will rise up and they will take back their own community. Does Israel need to occupy it? That's partly a military question, which I don't have an answer to, but I'll tell you socially, and the answer may be yes, but at a tremendous cost. But I'll tell you socially, that tremendous cost is frightening because we don't need to be in a small coastal enclave with millions of people where we are in fact responsible. If there were in fact a functioning Palestinian Authority and they were legitimate peace partners, one would hope that somehow part of the negotiation would be trucking in hundreds or thousands of PA security, and they would go and take over Gaza from Hamas on their own, and they can have their own little civil war and fight it out for the well-being of Palestinian Arabs. I support that.
Mm,
I don't want us to have to be in the position of policing them. I don't want us to be in the position of being accused of occupation when we unilaterally withdrew. And once we go in tactically, militarily, for specific reasons, and certainly to get back the 100+ hostages, yes. But what do you do after? What do you do
yeah.
after? I was doing some other interview, I don't remember with whom this week, and we spoke about that very notion. You go in, you control, you get the hostages back, please God. You root all of the Hamas infrastructure and their leaders. And then what? And then who's going to come in? The Jamaican bobsled team?
Yeah.
And they're going to be in charge? Egypt? I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you see Lebanon and Syria getting involved in this?
I think that that's a real possibility. We know that they've threatened, and I think that's why, and that's even more scary. Syria less, Lebanon and Hezbollah more, but that's one of the reasons why I think on a military basis, and this is something, it's not my unique theory, but I've heard echoed and I agree with. That's why the military response in Gaza now must be punishing because albeit while Hezbollah has the same goal as Hamas and they're all backed by the same evil Iranian Islamist regime, they don't want to die quite yet and they'll hold back if they are afraid that everything that they've built up over these decades will be destroyed for very little purpose. So I think we need to create that punishing sense of deterrence, so that Hassan Nasrallah in wherever he is, in whatever bunker he is in Lebanon somewhere, won't think for a moment about unleashing any rockets or cross-border infiltrations. And
Yeah.
I look, I don't want there to be an all-out war more than what we have, but it's time. And there's nobody in the world with a head on their shoulders and their eyes open that cannot see that Iran's evil hands are in all of this. And it's time not to empower them. It's time not to enable them. It's time certainly not to fund them with billions of dollars. It's time to squeeze the Iranian regime and let the Iranian people take back their country, because they don't want these Islamists governing them anymore. And I pray that if we have to go in and do that, and we have American aircraft carriers on their way to the Eastern Mediterranean, if that's what needs to be done, and maybe in coordination with the Saudis, who have come closer to our side, I'm all for that, because the only way to change things is to cut off the head of the snake. And
Mm.
the head of the snake, there are multiple snakes, but the big one is in Iran.
How can Christians pray for you, your family, and people just like you?
Thank you. That's the most important question. To please pray for our soldiers, all of them, and the families that they've left behind, whether it's young women and children, or siblings and parents, and certainly grandparents. And in some cases, we have sons and fathers fighting this same war, if not literally side by side, certainly figuratively. We need to pray for them. We need to pray for the families of the 1,200 plus victims so far, and the families of the 100 plus people that we know of who we believe are held hostage, and for the hostages themselves, and for everyone who's injured, and that we as a country will break away from the fear that's engulfing us, and maintain the tremendous sense of unity, which we haven't seen here in a very long time. That is a very long email to send to God's inbox, and I think that that would be more than sufficient.
If people want to give to help save life, what's your website address?
Thank you. So the general website is genesis123.co, and the specific page that we have for donations for this emergency fund is love.genesis123.co. Love.genesis123.co. All the donations that we receive there will go toward these emergency projects that I discussed earlier. And what's also nice, Paul, is that that specific page gives anyone who makes a donation the opportunity to send prayers and words of encouragement and support, which I'm committed to copying and handing out, whether we're going to soldiers or at-risk youth, or security officers in communities like mine, or people who are manning the first response stations. Whatever we need to do, we're going to be sending those prayers and words of encouragement out along with the monetary support, so that people know who the support is coming from.
Are you on Facebook as well?
Facebook at Genesis 123 Foundation, I think Twitter, Instagram. Yeah, and anyone can reach out to me through the Genesis123.co website, and send emails as well. And if anyone's listening to this before 10 p.m. Israel time on Thursday and would like to be part of our webinar that we have, they are welcome to reach out to me, and I will provide a link.
Okay, Jonathan, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity, Paul. It's very special, and thank you to everyone out there who's concerned and praying and standing with us.